So David, with what we've been just talking about here, I hope you don't mind me transitioning to this right now. Just another question I want to ask you here. But I think about all of the stuff that you as a professional in your field, an expert in your field, know about. And yet you often have the legislature who makes policies not being as informed as you are. And sometimes state policies can actually cause damage to our children, to the parents, to grandchildren. And I want to ask you about state policy, in particular, like, for example, with possession schedules. Or when a judge may say, you don't get to see your child, kind of restricting you from seeing your child, or either the mom or the dad or whatever. That does not seem to square up with, it almost seems like at times state policy mandates an absent parent or a visiting parent, and it seems to me that that would cause trauma to a child. Is that correct?
It does cause trauma. It's called abandonment trauma. And if we really flip it over and look at, you're not allowed to see the child, but really flip it over and say, well, the child's not allowed to see this parent, because of these state mandated guidelines. That's basically what you're inducing is abandonment trauma to the child. And oftentimes the child can develop anxieties because of that, because they have to guess what happens to the other parent who is more absent. Suddenly there was, one parent a majority of the time, there was another parent less of the time, and all of a sudden, along some time frame, they go back between each parent.
Right.
It can become predictable for them as they develop, and they become more knowledgeable, and so they can become adapted and used to it.
Yeah.
But as time also occurs, they become more attached to each parent.
Yeah.
So depending upon the child and the situation, the child can develop deeper attachments to each parent with these state mandated schedules.
Yeah.
But it can be harder for them because now they recognize that there would one parent less than the other.
Yeah.
And depending upon the child, they can recognize that things are not fair.
Yeah.
And that would be a blessing because whatever is being instilled in the child by the parents or being instilled just through generations, the child is developing a sense of value of equality.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes even much more recognizable to the child that this is not right, this is not equal. And so they are also can develop a moral sense.
Yeah.
But going back, I think more directly to your question, is that and I guess this would be considered conspiratorial, yet I find it interesting that it would be conspiratorial among millions of people in America across multiple state lines thinking the same thing concerning the underlying driving forces of this relative absence of a parent and how it relates to Title IV in order to receive federal funding subsidies for child support that's collected in each state. Namely, the biggest ones are California and Texas.
Well, Texas is actually number one.
Yeah, okay.
And that, I mean, it's interesting because California has more people than us and everything else, but Texas collects a lot more, or much more efficient. It's a bragging point for our state. I was amazed that during COVID they collected an additional 10 or 12%, and you have people that couldn't work or whatever, but the coffers of being filled because the money that was going out, that was supposed to be helping people was also being confiscated too. I don't think that was part of the whole thing anyway. I think what I also hear you saying at the same time, the best environment for a child is to be reared in a family with both parents. But in absence of that, I think what I hear you saying is that the best replication, the second best replication of an intact household would be something more along the lines of equal shared parenting, 50-50. Am I hearing you correctly in understanding that?
Yeah, actually, if you look at the research by multiple authors worldwide, the consensus is that despite other factors, when the child is offered maximized parenting between both parents, which is usually called shared parenting, the outcomes are much better. And this is despite economics. This is despite parental conflict, and pointing at parental conflict, actually the consensus is that parental conflict can have an impact of decreasing, that shared parenting or maximized parenting can have an impact of decreasing conflict. Because one of the inciting factors is inequality. I mean, anytime there's inequality through centuries of humankind across state, country boundary lines, anytime there's inequality, that is a natural inciting factor that leads to conflict.
Yeah.
That's partly why we have so much conflict in the past, historically.
Well, you hear you hear people saying, no justice, no peace.
Yeah, no justice, no peace.
Right.
So why would that same mentality occur with this situation?
Yeah.
That's being forced upon many parents that don't cohabitate or of divorce.
Yeah.
You know, and it's also being forced upon the children.
Yeah. I think it's a very important conversation we need to have, because what I hear you saying then is that the policy of the state of Texas right now, at least the way that it's being done in the courts, actually hurts our children.
It does. Actually, Edward Kruk did a review of the policy back, I think, in 2018, and he critiqued the policy, and specifically in Texas. And although he didn't use those exact words, he basically summarized the negative impact that the Texas Standard Possession Order at that time had upon kids. And now we know that there's the automatic elective of the expanded standard, but still, early on, it causes trauma to kids.
Right. Right.